is Naomi Ohman, and I'm going to be presenting the project that I worked on while I was here with El Terreno in my cultural internship. So first, a little bit about my initial ideas, kind of what I came in interested in. I was really interested in immigration coming from the United States, and kind of the flip side here of people immigrating out to cities and countries. I was also really interested in kind of the deeply rooted culture and customs and history that's here in comparison with the U.S., and then also, as a part of that, the legends of this province. So the first 2 weeks I sort of spent just exploring, meeting with as many people as I could, having a lot of conversations, developing some questions about what I was really interested in. And kind of through this, I also realized that I wanted my project to be focused more on pride in place than sort of problem-focused. So through those conversations, I developed some guiding questions. So that was, what is connection to home? How do we become disconnected, and what are the implications? And then how do we reconnect? And so because my Spanish wasn't very good, I collaborated with another volunteer named Kathy, and we developed some interview questions, kind of access those bigger themes. The 3 main ones were, what are your favorite memories from growing up here? What are you most proud of this place? And what does home mean to you? So this video is kind of a snapshot of the themes that we pulled from the interviews that kind of answered those questions.
You starting? Yeah. You're like, yeah.
Un sentimiento hermoso de pertenencia que es bien difícil de describir y de sistematizar.
Como decía mi madre, mi primer juguete era el machete.
En las montañas me gustaba todo, porque eran bonitas.
Para mí lo importante es, digamos, la naturaleza, ¿no? La naturaleza.
Una casita es como la madre que recoge a todos sus hijos.
Como aventuras alegres, aventuras tristes.
La minga, sí.
Digo que eso era la alegría de nosotros, el estar con los niños.
Mi comida favorita, para decirle la verdad, era la machica.
Eso era el recuerdo más grande que tengo de ayudar a mi mamá.
Es mucha pena que todo el mundo se dedica a destruir y no a sembrar, porque la tierra está muerta. Por eso ya no produce. La naturaleza es lo que nos da la felicidad.
Sí, fue una época de explotación, sí, hacia la tierra y hacia la gente, donde era como un tipo de sistema de feudal, llamado Huasipungo. Y está en el ADN, en las células.
Está como siempre presente esa idea en la gente, ¿ven? La ciudad como la meca del desarrollo y donde se va a poder cumplir todos los sueños, ¿ven?
I was really looking for a way to understand what I was missing from Bolivia, because I didn't know what I was missing until I left, or what was my real connection with that place that I grew up.
Yo veo que en mi país, y creo que una gran cantidad en Latinoamérica, es falta de autoestima.
Caminaba, sin darle cuenta de lo que tenía.
Al haber vivido en Quito también veo mucha gente que no tiene una conexión cierta y real, y a mí me parece que son vidas un poco dolorosas, un poco tristes, un poco fragmentadas. Son como existencias un poco siempre buscando ese centro, ese lugar al que pertenecen.
Yo veo que en el Ecuador ha habido gran desapego, diríamos, de la tierra. Porque razón, eso digo, como somos un país pequeño y la globalización nos han absorbido más fácilmente, y eso ha hecho que nos olvidemos de nuestra identidad también cultural.
Nos puedan manipular a través de medios de comunicación.
Lo que tú dices es lo que fue introducido. El alcohol, las cosas que te adormecen, las cosas que te hacen que te olvides de ese vacío y solamente estás estancado en un círculo, en un
Círculo vicioso.
círculo vicioso.
Y cuando tú tienes miedo, ahí ya desconectas automáticamente.
Detrás del miedo siempre puede haber crecimiento también.
Y a raíz de esos pensamientos es donde nacen las conexiones.
El sentirme conectado con mi gente y con mi tierra, con mi espacio. Y la tierra también se convierte en algo casi vivo, porque la tierra tiene memorias, la tierra tiene momentos y es casi como mágico.
Otra vez crear conciencia y restaurar.
El conocimiento en el campo es increíble. Y no tenemos que aprender, tenemos que desaprender muchas cosas.
The system that we have created is very hyper focused on jobs that supposed to give you a good paycheck. But in the end, that paycheck is not enough to be happy. And I feel like that's a big thing in my life now. I'm not looking for the best job, the best paycheck. I'm looking where can I be connected. Because I know like that wherever I go, I can find that connection and I can make it home.
Mira, esos recuerdos siempre me quedan. Jamás me voy a separar del campo. Una reconexión y ahora yo pienso que ya estamos con todos los conocimientos, la sabiduría y estamos recordando lo que somos.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that I got out of the interviews was how deep the connection to family is and the people here. And I think going back to the United States, just knowing that there is that deep connection to family, especially when like welcoming immigrants in, is going to be really something helpful. And just knowing how to welcome immigrants from South America, knowing kind of where they're coming from and what are the strongest parts of their culture. And I think another thing that I really thought about during this was sort of about immigration and kind of like why people immigrate. And I think here facilitating a sense of like appreciation for what is here, especially coming from the US, instead of having that stance of like you should immigrate to the US because it's the best country ever, and instead kind of looking at like, wow, there's this really deep culture, this history that we could learn from like in the US. And here, even if you, because sometimes there's no choice, you have to immigrate, but just leaving with that appreciation, I think could both help with overcoming those disconnections and also having more of a cultural exchange once in the US instead of sort of a integration without preserving that cultural heritage. And I think that kind of goes along with like how do you create home when you're in a new geographical location. And I think a big part of that is kind of understanding those really deep connections. So in this case, it's family, and like understanding that really deep connection to family, so that when you do move locations, you know that that's the connection you need to feel at home. And also I think we talked a lot about, especially with Kathy, just about how to create a new home and the things that you have to let go of, and broadening your idea of what is home. And so I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that I'm going to take back to the US with me, especially to Bozeman. Just having been able to see like how deep the roots are here in comparison with the US, and just appreciating being able to identify the American exceptionalism, and having more of an appreciation and an understanding of where immigrants are coming from, and how best to welcome them and help them create that sense of home, even though they might be removed removed from their culture and removed them from those roots. Yeah, so there was also a lot of things that I learned just from doing the interviews. So the first was anthropological thinking. So at the beginning, this meant holding multiple ideas at the same time, synthesizing them enough to like take steps forward while holding the results open. So the photo on the bottom left is of a mind map I made early on, just trying to record all of these ideas I had in threads, and sort of trying to figure out how they might fit together while keeping results completely open. And I think another thing in that category was prioritizing human connection over research. It's like in the interviews, really valuing the connection that we were getting to have with the person we were interviewing, no matter the results or the product that may or may not come out of it. And then also technical considerations. So I kind of found in the interviews, if the camera was out of the eye line of our interviewee, it kind of helped lessen the nerves and helped it just to move forward as a conversation rather than a formal interview. The place of interview was also really important. Comfort for the interviewee, sound in the environment. We had one spot that was really loud and made it really difficult. Convenience of access, and then also just aesthetics. Sound choices were another one. I chose to use an on-camera microphone to eliminate the step of attaching a lavalier to an interviewee because there was already a lot of nerves. And so having that extra step would have just made for a lot more anxiousness. Another lesson I learned was about language barrier. I don't speak very good Spanish. And it was really, really fun to work with Kathy and a huge blessing. But it made it a little bit difficult, so I was trying to anticipate the questions as best as possible before the interviews so that we could translate them. And obviously we had the 3 main ones, but there was some that we would add depending on where the person was coming from. One thing that was really cool to experience was the connection beyond language and being able to connect with the interviewees, no matter if I was able to hold like a very extensive conversation in Spanish with them. Another consideration that I learned was planning in time to troubleshoot interview processing. So for me, that meant all of the interviews were in Spanish and I had to figure out how I was going to understand them. And so that took like an extra week just to figure out how I was going to go through them. Some more lessons. So cultural considerations, on the spot interviews, being ready to interview at any time. We had one experience where we went for a long walk one Sunday and met 3 Marias who were all willing to participate in the project. So we said we were going to come back the next Sunday, but we couldn't find any of them. So we wandered around all day and didn't find one. And then the picture on the right is of the Maria we did get to interview. That was just as spontaneous, but because we were ready, we got to share that experience with her. And then body language and position. It was a really neat way. Body language for us was a really neat way to communicate just our genuine desire to hear their experiences and memories. And so one of the cool ways to communicate with this was sitting kind of below the person we were interviewing. And then gifts and sharing food. Sharing food is a big thing in the culture here. And so that was really fun to do with the people we were interviewing, just to really deepen the connection that we got to have with them. Another lesson was interview spacing and planning. So because of the way things worked out, we only had 3 weeks to do all of the interviews, which meant that we had multiple interview days, and it was really exhausting. And then afterwards, I had like 2 or 3 weeks where I had to process all of the interviews. So it was a lot of time on the computer. So if I was moving forward into a new project, I probably would space it out a little bit different and do, interviews one day and then processing the next to kind of break it up. But obviously that wasn't possible with our timeline. And then finally, one of the biggest lessons that I'm taking away is just the practical impact of the arts. It was really cool to see the direct impact that we got to have. One of these photos is of a living room where we got to interview a man named Raphael, and he just shared with us how special it was to him that, young people were coming to him to hear about his memories and record them, and that we were interested in in what he experienced. And so just having that direct impact was a really neat way to share film with the people that we interviewed. And then the other one is just more broadly the impact that arts can have. So like things like murals, film, writing. I kind of saw how they can be useful to both educate and create a mentality in a community where projects that are solutions to problems can succeed. So we were talking with one person who ran a sustainable farm, and he was sharing how they tried to do like a garbage collection project, but it didn't work because the community didn't support it. And the only way that projects like that succeed are if the community can support it. But community support comes from the knowledge and the mentality. So the role that arts play in being able to create that mentality and create an atmosphere where those projects can succeed. So that was another thing that I kind of pulled away from this project. Yeah, so I spent about 2 weeks processing all the interviews, and during that time kind of had a couple ideas for products, and ended up going with the idea to write a children's story. So I kind of had the idea for the storyline, started writing it, and it basically just wrote itself, and kind of returning to that idea of legends being a collective memory. This particular story, a lot of the experiences in there are shared experiences by the interviewees. Yeah, and also kind of the idea behind the story was just facilitating this narrative of pride in place and pride in home, and kind of appreciation for all the beautiful things here, rather than that feeling that it's not enough and that you have to go to the city or to another country to be successful. And so kind of starting with kids and just having a book that they can read that's about their own province and all the beautiful things there. So I spent about a week writing it, and then sent it to everyone I could to get feedback, and did a lot of editing. And then I read it to the kids in 2 English classes at El Terreno. One of the groups had the chance to do some drawings about what they took away from the story, which is pretty special. And then after that, I worked with Kathy to translate it. So kind of the next steps with the children's story, a local illustrator named Guido is going to design a mural that's going to be painted with some volunteers coming at this long wall at the school. And so the idea is that you could sit on the steps opposite and read the story visually on the wall or tell it. And I think what would be really cool is to get final edited text and illustrations and present it to the Ministry of Tourism or the Ministry of Culture in Guaranda, and get some support for printing so that the kids in the province could have access to it. Yeah, so just wrapping up, I wanted to give a huge thank you to participants from the community. It was really, really special getting to share those moments and hearing the memories and experiences from them. Also, thank you to El Terreno for all the logistical support and the contacts and making this project possible. And especially to Kathy for translating, collaborating, helping to kind of consolidate ideas, helping with the story. She was a really, really integral part in this project.